"Find somewhere else to die," my father said, standing in the hallway of the house my mother bought, 6 days after we buried her. He'd already changed the locks. His new wife was already measuring the master bedroom for new curtains. He told everyone I had no claim. He told the insurance company he was the sole beneficiary. He told me my mother couldn't protect me anymore. He was right about one thing. My mother couldn't speak for herself anymore. But what he didn't know was that she didn't need to. She'd already said everything she needed to say, in a document he never knew existed. My name is Dahlia Owens. I'm 28 years old, and I have lupus. Before I go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Now, let me take you back to last October, the night my mother's heart stopped, and the day everything changed. The hospital room smelled like hand sanitizer and dying flowers. Someone had left a vase of carnations on the windowsill 3 days earlier, and nobody had thought to throw them out. I was holding her hand. My mother's hand. It was so thin I could feel every bone. Eleanor Grace Owens, the woman who built a financial consulting career from a studio apartment and a library card, weighed 91 pounds. Pancreatic cancer had taken the rest. 14 months. That's what the doctors had given her. She used every single day. Her eyes opened, just barely. She looked at me, and for a second, she was herself again. Sharp, clear, present. "The house is yours, baby," she whispered. "Don't let anyone tell you different." I squeezed her hand. I thought it was the morphine. I thought she was confused, saying things that wouldn't mean anything tomorrow. She closed her eyes. The monitor beeped. Then it didn't. I sat there for 11 minutes before the nurse came in. I know because I counted every second. My father arrived 2 hours later. Denise was with him. His new wife, though he swore she wasn't new, swore they'd only been together a few months. She carried a designer handbag I'd never seen before. Her eyes were dry. Perfectly dry. Richard Owens stood at the foot of my mother's empty bed and said, "At least she's not suffering anymore." He didn't look at me. My hands were swollen. My knees were locked. I was in the middle of a lupus flare so bad I'd been using a wheelchair for the past week. I couldn't stand without the bed rail, and my mother, the only person who ever made sure I could stand at all, was gone. She told me the house was mine. I didn't understand then. I do now. 83 people came to my mother's funeral. I know because Aunt Vivian counted. Eleanor Owens was the kind of woman people remembered. She ran free tax workshops at the community center every spring. She brought soup to every new mother on our block. She once spent an entire Saturday helping a neighbor understand his mortgage paperwork so he wouldn't lose his home. 83 people came for her, and my father stood at the podium and talked about himself. "I lost my partner," he said, gripping the edges of the lectern. "My rock. My anchor." He spoke for 6 minutes. He mentioned my mother's name 4 times. He mentioned his own grief 9 times. I was counting. Denise stood in the front row. Black dress. Gold bracelet. New, heavy, catching the light every time she moved. She cried exactly when someone was looking at her and stopped exactly when they turned away. I watched her do it 3 times. I sat in my wheelchair near the side aisle. Not the front row. Nobody had saved me a seat there. Aunt Vivian, my mother's older sister, sat beside me. She held my hand the way Mom used to. Firm, warm, like she was keeping me from floating away. "Something's not right with that woman," Vivian whispered, watching Denise dab at dry eyes with a folded tissue. After the service, people lined up to hug Richard. Denise accepted condolences like she was hosting a cocktail party. Gracious nods, soft thank yous, a hand on every arm. I was wheeling myself toward the parking lot when I saw Denise step behind the chapel, phone pressed to her ear. Her voice was low, but I caught every word. "It's done. We can start Monday." She hung up, turned, saw me, smiled. "You should rest, sweetheart," she said. "You look exhausted." 3 days after the funeral, the house still smelled like the lilies people had sent, wilting petals on every surface. Richard called me to the living room. He sat in my mother's armchair, the green velvet one she'd had since before I was born. Denise sat on the armrest beside him, legs crossed, one hand on his shoulder. "We need to talk about the house," Richard said. I was on the couch across from them. My joints ached, my hands were stiff. I'd barely slept in a week. "This house," he continued, "the investment accounts, the life insurance, it all comes to me. I'm the surviving spouse. That's how the law works." Denise nodded. "It's what the law says, sweetie." Richard slid a piece of paper across the coffee table. A quitclaim deed. My name was already typed at the bottom. All I had to do was sign. "Just make it easy," he said. "For everyone." I stared at the paper. The ink was fresh. Someone had prepared this in advance. "Mom told me the house was mine," I said. Richard leaned back. "She was on painkillers. That means nothing." "She said it before the painkillers." His jaw tightened. "Your mother spoiled you. You think you deserve something you didn't earn?" Denise rubbed his shoulder. "Honey, she's grieving. Give her a minute." I didn't touch the paper. "I already have a lawyer," Richard said. His voice dropped. Calm, practiced. "He says your mother died without a will. No will means everything goes to me. That's the law in this state." He stood up, looked down at me. "If you don't sign this by Friday, I'll have you removed." He walked out. Denise followed. She left the quitclaim deed on the table, perfectly centered, like a place setting. Friday was 2 days away. Friday came. I didn't sign. At midnight, my bedroom door opened. No knock, no warning, just the click of the handle and the hallway light cutting across my bed. Richard stood in the doorway holding an empty suitcase. He tossed it onto my blanket. "Pack your things." I sat up. My shoulders screamed. The flare was getting worse, my joints hot, swollen, every movement like grinding glass. "This is Mom's house," I said. "Your mom is dead, and I'm the surviving spouse. This is my house." Behind him, in the hallway, Denise leaned against the wall, arms folded, watching, the smallest smile on her lips. Richard stepped closer. His voice was low, steady, the kind of calm that comes from having already decided. "Find somewhere else to die. Your mother isn't here to protect you anymore." I looked at him for a long time. My father. The man who drove me to my first lupus appointment when I was 16. The man who used to carry me to bed when the pain was too bad to walk. That man was gone. Or maybe he'd never really been there. Maybe it was always Mom standing behind him, holding us both up. I packed what I could. Clothes, medications, my mother's reading glasses from the nightstand. I dragged the suitcase across the porch she used to sit on every morning. Her wind chimes were still ringing in the cold. I called Aunt Vivian at 1 a.m. She answered on the first ring. She didn't ask questions. She just said, "I'm coming." In her car, I couldn't cry. My body didn't have the energy. Vivian reached over and held my hand on the center console. "We're going to figure this out," she said. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a number surfaced. A phone number my mother had made me memorize years ago. I'd never called it. I didn't even know whose it was, until now. Aunt Vivian's guest room had yellow curtains and a quilt that smelled like cedar. I sat on the edge of the bed at 3 a.m. and tried to figure out what I had left. I opened my phone, checked my bank account. $2,112. That was everything. I called my pharmacy the next morning. The automated system cut through before I could even spell my last name. "Your insurance has been terminated. If you'd like to pay out of pocket, the total for your current prescriptions is $1,814. 1 month of medication. Nearly my entire savings. Hydroxychloroquine, prednisone. The drugs that kept my immune system from eating my own body alive. Without them, the flares would get worse. The kidney damage would accelerate. My doctor had been clear about that for years. Richard hadn't just taken my home. He'd cut off my ability to stay alive. I sat at Vivian's kitchen table with a mug of tea I couldn't drink because my hands were too swollen to grip it. She sat across from me and watched me stare at nothing. "Your mama told me something once," she said quietly. "It was about a year before she got sick. She grabbed my arm at Thanksgiving, right in the kitchen while Richard was watching football, and she said, 'If anything happens to me, tell Dahlia to call Margaret Hollis.' I looked up. Who's Margaret Hollis? Vivian reached into her purse. She pulled out a folded napkin, old, soft at the creases, a phone number written in blue ink. I don't know, she said. But your mama wrote this down and made me keep it. She said you'd need it when things got bad. I took the napkin. The handwriting was my mother's. Neat, deliberate. Even on a napkin, she didn't rush. Things were bad. Things were as bad as they could get. Or so I thought. Richard moved fast. I'll give him that. Within a week, he'd called every relative in our family. Uncle Thomas, Uncle Gerald, cousins I hadn't spoken to since Thanksgiving 2 years ago. He called them all. His version of the story went like this. Dahlia, still grieving, became erratic. She refused to cooperate with the estate process. She left the house on her own. She was unwell, physically, and he implied, mentally. She needs help, he told Uncle Thomas. I tried. She wouldn't let me. Denise handled the digital side. She posted on the family Facebook group, the one Aunt Eleanor had created years ago for sharing holiday photos and birthday wishes. We tried to help Dahlia, but she wants to do things her own way. Please pray for her. 47 reactions, hearts, praying hands, comments like, so sorry you're going through this, directed at Richard and Denise, not at me. My phone rang for 3 days straight. Cousins, aunts, people I barely knew. Your dad just lost his wife. Don't make this harder. He's trying his best, Dahlia. Maybe you should apologize. I stopped answering. Vivian fielded the calls for me while I lay on her guest bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the inflammation crawl up my wrists like fire under the skin. One person believed me. One person out of my entire family. Vivian sat on the edge of my bed that night and handed me the napkin again. Call that number tomorrow, she said. First thing. I smoothed the napkin between my swollen fingers. Margaret Hollis. I didn't know her. Didn't know what she did. Didn't know what my mother had told her or why. But my mother had planned this. She'd written the number down. She'd told Vivian to remember. My mother didn't do things without a reason. I set my alarm for 7 a.m. I called at 7:15. No answer. Again at 7:40. Voicemail. 8:05. Voicemail again. At 8:22, I dialed for the 4th time. My thumb was shaking, not from the lupus this time. 2 rings. Then a voice. Low, steady, warm in the way that courtroom voices sometimes are. Professional warmth. The kind that makes you trust someone before you know why. Hollis and Crane, attorneys at law. I swallowed. My name is Dahlia Owens. My mother was Eleanor. Dahlia Owens? The voice changed, not louder, closer. Eleanor's daughter? Yes. A pause. 3 seconds, maybe 4. I could hear a chair creak. I've been waiting for your call. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. Your mother came to me 3 years ago, Margaret said. She knew this would happen. She prepared for it. 3 years. Before the diagnosis, before the chemo, before Denise ever unpacked a suitcase in our house. My mother had walked into this woman's office 3 years ago and started getting ready for the moment I was living right now. I can't say more over the phone, Margaret continued. Can you come to my office tomorrow, 10 a.m.? Yes, I can. Good. Bring your ID, nothing else. I wrote down the address with a pen Vivian handed me, my hand trembling on the paper. Dahlia, Margaret's voice slowed. Whatever you do, do not sign anything your father gives you, and don't tell him you called me. I won't. One more thing. Your mother told me you'd call when things got bad. She said I'd know because you'd sound exactly the way you sound right now. I couldn't speak. My throat closed around something that felt like a fist. She also told me to tell you, you're going to be okay. The line clicked. I sat on Vivian's kitchen floor with the phone against my chest and breathed. Tomorrow. 10 a.m. Answers. The letter arrived at Vivian's house the next morning, hand-delivered by courier. Cream-colored envelope, heavy paper, the kind lawyers use when they want you to feel small before you even open it. Bradley Knox, Esquire, representing Richard Allen Owens. I read it standing in Vivian's kitchen, still in my pajamas, coffee getting cold on the counter. The language was sharp and clean. Eleanor Owens died intestate, without a valid will. Under state law, the surviving spouse is entitled to the entirety of the marital estate. Ms. Dahlia Owens is hereby directed to cease any and all claims to the Birchwood Lane property and associated financial accounts within 10 calendar days. There was a second paragraph, the one that made my vision blur. Furthermore, our client intends to petition the court for a determination of incapacity regarding Ms. Dahlia Owens, on the basis of her chronic medical condition, which renders her unable to manage her own financial and legal affairs, mentally incapacitated. My own father was trying to have me declared incompetent, not because I couldn't think, because I had lupus. Vivian read the letter over my shoulder. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then she picked up her purse and her car keys. "Get dressed," she said. "We have an appointment in 90 minutes. She drove me to the pharmacy first, paid for my medications out of her own savings, $1,814. She didn't flinch. She just handed over her debit card and said, "Eleanor would have done the same for my kids." In the car, I stared at the letter again. The word incapacity sat in the center of the page like a bruise. My father hadn't just taken my home and my insurance. He was coming for my legal right to fight back. We pulled into Margaret Hollis's parking lot at 9:53, 7 minutes early. I was done being late. Margaret's office was on the second floor of a brick building downtown. Small brass nameplate by the door. No flash, no marble lobby, just quiet competence. I was sitting in her waiting room when my phone rang. Richard. I almost didn't answer. But something in me, maybe the part that still remembered he was my father, picked up. "Sign the paper, Dahlia." "No. You have nothing, no money, no job, no insurance. I have rights. You have lupus, that's all you have." The words landed like a slap, clean, deliberate. He'd practiced that. "Mom wouldn't want this," I said. "Your mom is gone, I'm what's left. Then I'll talk to a lawyer." Silence. Long enough that I could hear Denise whispering something in the background. "What lawyer?" he finally said. "With what money?" I hung up. My hand was trembling. I set the phone face down on the chair beside me and pressed my palms flat against my thighs until they stopped shaking. The receptionist looked at me. She didn't say anything, but she pushed a glass of water across the counter. Vivian was sitting beside me. She'd heard the whole thing. "What did he say?" she asked. I looked at her. "He doesn't know yet." Vivian studied my face. She nodded slowly. She understood. At 10 a.m. exactly, the inner door opened. A woman stood there, early 60s, silver-streaked hair pulled back, reading glasses perched on her nose. She wore a gray blazer over a white blouse. No jewelry except a thin watch. She looked like the kind of person who never raised her voice because she never needed to. "Dahlia," she smiled. Not the sympathetic smile people had been giving me for weeks. A real one, warm and sure. "I'm Margaret Hollis. Your mother was one of my closest friends. Come in." I spent 2 hours in Margaret's office that morning. She told me things I'll share with you soon. But first, I need to tell you what happened while I was there. Because Denise wasn't sitting still either. My phone buzzed as I was leaving Margaret's building. Dr. Nathan Briggs, my rheumatologist, the man who'd been treating my lupus for 6 years. He never called unless something was wrong. "Dahlia, I need you to know something." His voice was careful, measured. "A woman called my office this morning, identified herself as Denise Owens, said she was your stepmother and legal guardian." I stopped walking. Vivian held my arm. "She requested a full copy of your medical records, treatment history, psychological evaluations, medication lists, everything." "What did you tell her?" I told her no. HIPAA doesn't allow it. She's not your guardian. She's not on any of your forms. He paused. "But Dahlia," she was specific. She asked about cognitive function. She asked if your condition affects your decision-making. My stomach dropped. "They're building a case," Dr. Briggs said quietly. "They want documentation that says you can't take care of yourself." I leaned against Vivian's car. The October wind bit through my coat. "Can I give you some advice?" he said. "Not as your doctor, as someone who's watched you fight this disease for 6 years. Yes, I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you, protect yourself." I thanked him, hung up, told Vivian everything. She gripped the steering wheel until her knuckles went pale. That woman is evil. That night, I sat on Vivian's guest bed and wrote down everything. Every conversation, every date, every dollar, everything my mother had ever said about the house, the accounts, the future. And I remembered something else, a sentence from years ago, when Mom thought I was asleep on the couch. Everything's in my name, baby, not his, mine. She'd been talking to someone on the phone. I never knew who. Now I was beginning to understand. Let me take you back to that morning in Margaret's office, the part I skipped. The room was small, but warm. Bookshelves floor to ceiling, legal texts with cracked spines. On the wall behind her desk, a framed photograph. 2 young women on a college lawn, laughing. One was Margaret. The other was my mother, 20 years old, with her whole life ahead of her. Margaret caught me looking at it. Fall of '84, she said. Your mother was the smartest person I ever met, and I went to law school. She sat down, opened a drawer, pulled out a leather folder, thick, worn at the corners. Your mother came to me 3 years ago, she said, right after she found text messages on Richard's phone. Messages from Denise. I felt the room tilt. 3 years ago? That was before she was even diagnosed. Exactly. Margaret folded her hands on the desk. She came to me and said, I need to make sure Dahlia is taken care of, no matter what happens to me. She wasn't sick yet, but she was clear-eyed. She saw what Richard was becoming. Margaret opened the folder. Inside I could see stacked documents, tabbed and labeled. She didn't show me the contents. Not yet. Your mother put everything in order, Dahlia. The house, the accounts, everything. What do you mean, everything? She held up a sealed manila envelope. Heavy. Official. My mother's handwriting on the front. Just my name. Dahlia. Your mother wrote this for you, but you'll hear it at the reading. The reading? The formal reading of her will. Margaret leaned forward. Which I will be scheduling within the next 2 weeks. Every relevant party will be required to attend. She paused. Let the weight of it settle. Your mother wasn't afraid of dying, Dahlia. She was afraid of what would happen to you after. I couldn't touch the envelope. I could only stare at my name in her handwriting and feel my chest crack open. Margaret gave me a glass of water. I drank half of it before I realized my hands had stopped shaking. Here's what you need to understand, she said. Your father's lawyer is claiming Eleanor died intestate, without a will. That's the foundation of everything he's doing. The quitclaim deed, the insurance claim, the incapacity petition. All of it rests on the idea that your mother left nothing behind. She tapped the leather folder. He's wrong. Margaret explained it piece by piece. My mother had executed a formal last will and testament 3 years ago. It was notarized by a retired judge, Judge Patricia Henley, a personal friend of Margaret's. 2 independent witnesses signed. And Eleanor had recorded a video statement to accompany it, confirming her wishes in her own voice, on camera, while healthy and lucid. This will is airtight, Margaret said. No competent attorney would challenge it. My mind was spinning. 3 years. My mother had spent 3 years preparing for this and never said a word to me. She also left a handwritten letter, Margaret added. She wanted everyone to hear it. Everyone? At the reading. I'll send formal notice to Richard, to his attorney, and to the relevant family members. They'll all be in the room. I sat with that. The image of Richard, sitting in a room, hearing my mother's words read aloud, words he didn't know existed. You don't have to fight, Dahlia. Margaret's voice softened for the first time. Your mother already fought for you. All you have to do is show up. I cried then, quietly. Not the way I'd been crying all month. Out of pain, out of fear, out of exhaustion. This was different. This was the cry of someone who just learned she wasn't alone after all. Margaret pushed a box of tissues across the desk. She didn't rush me. There's one more thing your mother did, she said after I'd wiped my eyes, but it's better if you hear it with everyone else in the room. 2 days later, the letters went out. Certified mail. Return receipt requested. Richards arrived at the Birchwood Lane house, my mother's house, on a Tuesday morning. I know because Aunt Vivian told me what happened next. He called her. His voice wasn't the same voice that told me to find somewhere else to die. This voice was thinner, faster, almost confused. "Who is Margaret Hollis?" Eleanor never mentioned a lawyer. Vivian kept her answer short. "Come to the reading and find out." "What reading? There is no will. My lawyer already confirmed." "Then you have nothing to worry about, Richard." She hung up. That evening my phone rang. Richard again. But the tone had changed. The cold authority was gone. In its place, something I almost didn't recognize. He sounded careful. "Listen, sweetheart. Maybe we can work something out. You don't need a lawyer." Sweetheart. He hadn't called me that since I was 15. "I'll be at the reading, Dad. Dahlia. See you there." I hung up. Vivian looked at me across the kitchen table. She raised her coffee mug in a silent toast. Denise posted on Facebook that night. No direct mention of the reading, just a Bible verse about betrayal and a caption. "When family turns on you, God sees everything." 8 heart reactions. 3 prayer emojis. I didn't respond. I didn't even open the app. I was sitting on Vivian's couch, making a list Margaret had asked me to prepare. Dates, events, things my mother had said. Margaret had also called me that afternoon with an update. Richard had hired a second lawyer, Carl Myers, a specialist in estate disputes. "He's panicking," Margaret said. I could hear the calm smile in her voice. "Good." 2 weeks. 14 days until everyone sat in the same room and my mother spoke for the last time. I took my medication. I went to bed. And for the first night in weeks, I slept without waking up. The morning of the reading, I stood in front of Vivian's bathroom mirror for a long time. I'd lost weight. The flare was still active. My fingers were puffy, my wrists stiff, and there were shadows under my eyes that no amount of concealer could fix. But I put on a clean blouse, a dark blazer Vivian had lent me, simple flats because heels were out of the question. Margaret had said, "Come dressed like you belong." Because you do. Vivian drove. Neither of us spoke. The radio was off, just the sound of tires on wet asphalt and Vivian's turn signal clicking like a metronome. Hollis and Crane occupied a quiet corner office in a brick building on Whitmore Street, 2nd floor. No elevator. I took the stairs one at a time, Vivian's hand on my elbow. The conference room was already set up. Long oak table, 12 chairs, water pitchers at each end. A window overlooking the street, pale October light falling across the carpet. People were already there. Uncle Thomas, my mother's younger brother, gray beard, flannel shirt, hands in his pockets. He nodded at me. Uncle Gerald, Eleanor's baby brother, quiet, sitting at the far end. Linda Torres, the family accountant, glasses on a chain around her neck, legal pad open, 2 paralegals from Margaret's firm seated near the door. Then Richard walked in. He wore a navy suit, fresh haircut. Denise was a step behind, black dress, modest neckline, tissue already in hand, ready to perform. Behind them, Bradley Knox, thin and tall, briefcase like a shield. Carl Myers, shorter, rounder, already sweating. Richard sat on one side of the table. I sat on the other. We were 8 feet apart. It felt like a canyon. Then Margaret entered. She carried a leather folder in one hand and a laptop under her arm. She set both down at the head of the table. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. "Let's begin." Knox spoke first. He buttoned his jacket as he stood, like he was about to address a jury. "Before we begin, my client would like to note that he was unaware of any will and questions its validity." He sat back down. 12 seconds. Practiced. Margaret didn't stand. She didn't need to. She adjusted her reading glasses and opened the leather folder. "Noted," she said. "The will was executed 3 years ago. Notarized by Judge Patricia Henley. Witnessed by 2 independent parties who are available to testify. Its validity is beyond question." Knox shifted in his chair. Myers wrote something on his pad. Richard stood up. His chair scraped against the floor. "My wife never told me about any of this." Margaret looked at him. Her expression didn't change. "She wasn't required to, Mr. Owens." A ripple moved through the room. Uncle Thomas glanced at Uncle Gerald. Linda Torres stopped writing. Denise leaned forward. "This is ridiculous." Her voice cracked, just enough to sound wounded. Eleanor was sick. She wasn't thinking clearly. Margaret turned to Denise. Slowly, the way you turn to face something you've been expecting. Mrs. Pratt Owens, you are not a party to this will. I'll ask you to remain silent unless addressed. The room went still, completely still. The only sound was the clock on the wall and the soft tap of Meyer's pen against his legal pad. Denise opened her mouth, closed it. Her hand found Richard's arm, but he didn't look at her. Knox leaned toward Richard and whispered something. Richard's jaw clenched. He sat down. Margaret waited until the silence had fully settled. Then she opened to the first page. Now, let me read the last will and testament of Eleanor Grace Owens, she began. But she didn't get far. Margaret had barely read the preamble, Eleanor's full legal name, the date of execution, the standard declarations of sound mind, when Richard broke. He didn't shout. That would have been easier. Instead, he turned in his chair until he was facing me directly. His eyes were hard. His voice was even. You know what your problem is, Dahlia? Margaret stopped reading. The room held its breath. You've been a burden your whole life. Uncle Thomas straightened in his chair. Linda Torres set her pen down. Your mother spent everything on your medical bills, every dime, and what did you give back? Nothing. I didn't move. My hands were flat on the table, swollen knuckles pressed against the wood. You can't work. You can't live alone. You can't even walk without help some days. He shook his head. Eleanor felt guilty about your disease. That's the only reason she kept you around. Guilt, not love. The words hit me one at a time, each one precise, each one aimed at the place that was already bleeding. Aunt Vivian stood up so fast her chair hit the wall behind her. That is enough, Richard. Uncle Thomas was shaking his head. I can't believe what I'm hearing. Denise placed her hand on Richard's arm. Honey, calm down. Her voice was gentle, concerned, but her eyes were bright, alert. She wanted this. She wanted every word of it on the record. What she didn't know, what nobody in that room knew yet, was that Margaret's paralegal had been recording since the moment the meeting began. Standard procedure for contested estate proceedings in this state. Perfectly legal. I looked at Margaret. She gave me the smallest nod, barely a movement, just enough, and I knew. My mother was about to speak. Margaret let the silence stretch. She didn't rush it. She let every person in that room sit with what Richard had just said. Then she spoke. Quietly. The way a surgeon speaks before the first cut. Are you finished, Mr. Owens? Richard said nothing. His chest was rising and falling. Denise was still holding his arm. Good. Margaret placed both hands on the document. Because your wife had something to say about all of that. She turned to the first substantive page. The room was so quiet I could hear Uncle Gerald's breathing from the far end of the table. Margaret read, I, Eleanor Grace Owens, being of sound mind and body, hereby declare this to be my last will and testament, revoking all prior wills and codicils. She continued through the standard clauses, executor designation, revocation language, state compliance. I watched Richard's face. He was still, waiting. Then Margaret reached the first bequest. To my daughter, Dahlia Marie Owens. Richard sat forward. Denise stopped dabbing her eyes. I leave the family residence located at 417 Birchwood Lane, which has been held in the Eleanor G. Owens Revocable Living Trust since 2021. Richard's mouth opened. What? Margaret continued without pausing. The property was transferred into the trust on March 14, 2021. The trust names Dahlia Marie Owens as sole beneficiary upon my passing. That's impossible. Richard gripped the edge of the table. My name is on that deed. I signed. Your name was never on the deed, Mr. Owens. Margaret looked up from the page. Her glasses caught the light. The property was purchased with Eleanor's separate funds in 2014. It was always Eleanor's separate property. The trust simply formalized that. The color left Richard's face. Not slowly. All at once, like someone had pulled a plug. Margaret turned the page. And that's just the house. Shall I continue? Margaret continued. The life insurance policy through Pacific Mutual. Face value, $2,100,000. Beneficiary, Dahlia Marie Owens. Designated 3 years ago. Confirmed by the insurer. Richard turned to Knox. Knox shook his head. He was already writing. The Vanguard investment portfolio, valued at approximately $4,200,000, held within the Eleanor G. Owens Revocable Living Trust, sole beneficiary upon death, Dahlia Marie Owens. Uncle Thomas leaned back in his chair. His eyes were wide. The individual retirement accounts at Fidelity, current value approximately $1,800,000. Designated beneficiary, Dahlia Marie Owens. Linda Torres, the accountant, was flipping through her own notes. She looked up at Margaret. Margaret met her gaze and nodded. Linda nodded back. The numbers were clean. The savings account at First National, containing approximately $850,000. Originally a joint account. Eleanor separated it into an individual account on June 12, 2022. The balance passes to Dahlia Marie Owens. Margaret paused. She turned one more page. To Vivian Louise Perry, my beloved sister, $500,000, with my gratitude for a lifetime of love. Vivian pressed her hand to her mouth. She hadn't known. To the Lupus Research Alliance, $200,000, in honor of my daughter's strength. Margaret set the page down. She removed her glasses, looked directly at Richard. To Richard Allen Owens, my husband, $50,000. As a gesture of goodwill and to fulfill my legal obligation to acknowledge his existence in this document. $50,000, out of everything. Richard was gripping the table with both hands. His knuckles were white. Denise sat beside him, perfectly still, staring at the document like it was written in a language she didn't speak. Margaret closed the page. Ms. Torres can confirm all transfers, designations, and trust documents are in order and have been independently verified. Linda Torres spoke for the first time. Confirmed. Richard was on his feet before Margaret finished setting the document down. This is fraud. His voice bounced off the walls. She forged this. Eleanor would never... Knox grabbed his arm. Sit down. He said it twice. Sit down right now. Richard didn't sit. His hand was pointed at the folder like it was a weapon. Knox turned to Margaret. His voice was controlled, but I could see the strain in his jaw. Can we verify the witnesses? Judge Patricia Henley notarized it personally, Margaret said. She didn't blink. I have her signed attestation. Would you like to call her? Knox didn't answer. He didn't need to. A sitting judge's notarization was a fortress. He knew it. Myers knew it. Everyone in that room with a law degree knew it. Richard spun toward me. You put her up to this. Spit at the corner of his mouth. You manipulated a dying woman. I looked at him, my father, his face red, his hands shaking, every mask gone. I spoke for the first time since the meeting began. My voice was steady. I don't know how. Mom did this 3 years ago, before she was even sick, before Denise moved in. The words hung in the air. I watched them land on every face around the table. Uncle Thomas nodded slowly. Uncle Gerald closed his eyes. Denise stood up, tears streaming now, real or manufactured. I couldn't tell anymore. This family is tearing itself apart. Eleanor wouldn't want this. Aunt Vivian didn't even look at her. Sit down, Denise. You didn't know Eleanor. I did. Denise froze, then sat. Knox leaned close to Richard's ear. I was near enough to hear the whisper. We can't contest this, not with a judge's notarization and video evidence. Richard looked at Knox the way a drowning man looks at a life raft that's floating away. Video? He said. What video? Margaret opened the laptop. Eleanor recorded a video statement to accompany the will, Margaret said. She positioned the laptop so the screen faced the center of the table. She asked that it be played in full. She pressed play. And there she was, my mother, sitting in the living room at Birchwood Lane, the green velvet armchair, the same one Richard had claimed as his, late afternoon light through the window. Her hair was still thick, her face still full. This was before the cancer, before the chemo hollowed her out. She was wearing the blue cardigan I'd given her for Christmas 3 years ago. If you're watching this, she said, then I'm gone. Her voice was clear, calm. The voice I remembered from bedtime stories and doctors' waiting rooms, and every single night she sat beside me during a flare, rubbing my hands until I could sleep. And I'm guessing Richard is sitting in that room right now, angry. I looked at Richard. He flinched, just slightly, like she'd tapped him on the shoulder from somewhere he couldn't see. I want Dahlia to know something. Mom looked directly into the camera. You were never a burden. You are the best thing I ever did. Your lupus doesn't define you. Your heart does. Aunt Vivian grabbed my hand under the table. I put everything in your name because I trust you. Not because I don't love your father, but because I know what happens when grief meets greed. She paused, took a breath. Richard, if you're listening, I hoped you'd prove me wrong. I really did. Uncle Thomas wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Uncle Gerald's head was bowed. Linda Torres had stopped writing entirely. Richard stared at the screen. His jaw was locked. His hands were flat on the table. He didn't move. Denise's eyes drifted toward the conference room door, and then my mother said, "There's one more thing I need to say. About Denise." My mother's face on the screen didn't change. She didn't look angry. She didn't look bitter. She looked like a woman telling the truth because she wouldn't get another chance. "Denise," she said, "I know you've been seeing Richard since before my diagnosis. I found the messages on his phone 2 months before I went to see Margaret." The room stopped breathing. I turned to look at Denise. The tissue was frozen against her cheek. Her eyes were fixed on the screen. The performance was over. Richard's head snapped toward Denise. "You told me she never—" "I don't say this out of bitterness," my mother continued, her voice cutting cleanly through the room. "I say this because Dahlia deserves to know, and everyone in this room deserves to know, that the decisions I made were based on facts, not feelings." Uncle Thomas's hands were gripping his knees. Uncle Gerald looked at Richard with an expression I'd never seen on his gentle face before. Disgust. Mom went on. "Richard chose Denise before I even started chemo. I chose to protect my daughter." My chest ached, not from the lupus, from the weight of understanding. My mother had known everything. She'd watched her husband fall for someone else while she was still healthy, still present, still making dinner and folding laundry in a house she knew she might lose. And she didn't scream, she didn't beg. She went to a lawyer and built a wall around me. "Dahlia," Mom said. She smiled then. Small, sad, beautiful. "Live your life, take care of your health, and remember, you don't owe anyone who chose to leave you." The screen went dark. Nobody spoke. Denise picked up her handbag. She stood. She walked to the door, opened it, and left. She didn't look at Richard. She didn't look at anyone. Richard sat alone on his side of the table. No wife, no new wife, just a man in a navy suit, staring at a closed laptop with 12 people watching him become exactly what my mother said he would. Margaret closed the laptop. She placed her glasses back on. When she spoke, her voice was the same as it had been at the start. Measured, professional, utterly unshakable. "The trust transfers effective immediately. Dahlia Marie Owens is the sole owner of the Birchwood Lane property." She turned a page in the folder. "Regarding the life insurance policy and investment accounts, I've already filed the necessary documentation with the respective institutions. Dahlia's beneficiary status has been confirmed by each one." Knox was packing his briefcase. He hadn't spoken since the video. Myers was staring at his blank legal pad like it owed him an explanation. Margaret looked at Richard. "Mr. Owens, you have 30 days to vacate the Birchwood Lane property, as you are no longer a legal occupant." Richard's voice came out small. Smaller than I'd ever heard it. "She can't just kick me out of my own home." "It was never your home, Mr. Owens." Margaret's tone held no cruelty, just facts. "The deed has been in Eleanor's trust since 2021. You were a permitted occupant. That permission ended with Eleanor's passing, and the terms of the trust." Knox stood. He touched Richard's shoulder. "Let's go." Richard didn't move. "We'll need time to review," Knox said to Margaret. It was the kind of thing lawyers say when there's nothing left to review. "Of course," Margaret replied, "but the law is clear, and the clock starts today." Knox guided Richard to his feet. They walked toward the door. Richard's steps were slow, heavy, like the floor had gotten deeper. He didn't look at me. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't say anything at all. He walked out the same way he walked into my mother's hospital room the night she died, late and alone. 3 days passed. I stayed at Vivian's. I didn't call Richard. I didn't check Facebook. I took my medication, kept my appointment with Dr. Briggs, and read a book my mother had left on her nightstand, a novel about a woman who sailed around the world alone. Mom had dog-eared page 212. On the fourth morning, my phone rang. Richard. I almost let it go to voicemail, but I answered, because I wanted this to be the last time. His voice was different. Not the commanding voice from the living room. Not the cold voice from midnight. This was the voice of a man who had run out of people to stand behind. Dahlia, I'm your father. You can't just throw me out. You threw me out at midnight, when I was sick, in the cold. I was angry. I wasn't thinking straight. You told me to find somewhere else to die. Silence. I could hear him breathing. Denise made me. No. My voice didn't waver. You're a grown man. You made your own choices. More silence. Longer this time. I could picture him sitting in Mom's kitchen, at Mom's table, in Mom's house. For 30 more days. I'm not doing this out of revenge, Dad. I meant it. I needed him to hear that. I'm doing this because Mom wanted me safe, and you showed me exactly why she was right. He started to say something. I didn't wait for it. You have 30 days. Margaret's firm will help you find housing if you need it. Dahlia. Goodbye, Dad. I ended the call, set the phone on the kitchen counter. My hand was trembling, not from lupus this time, just from the ordinary pain of closing a door on someone who should have been holding it open for you. Vivian was standing in the doorway. She didn't ask what he said. She just walked over and held me. 30 days later, I turned the key in my own front door. Richard had left the week before, moved to Ohio, to his brother's house. He'd taken his clothes, his golf clubs, and a box of tools from the garage. He left everything else. The furniture, the dishes, my mother's things. He left her wind chimes on the porch. I don't know if that was kindness or just forgetting. I chose to believe it was the last decent thing he did. The house smelled like dust and closed windows, and underneath it all, like her. Lavender hand cream. The wool throw she kept on the couch. Coffee beans she stored in the freezer because she swore it kept them fresh. I walked through every room. Kitchen, living room. The hallway where he'd stood that midnight with an empty suitcase. My old bedroom. Her bedroom. I stopped in her doorway. The green velvet armchair was where she'd always kept it, by the window, angled toward the garden. On the nightstand beside her bed was something I hadn't expected. A journal, leather-bound. My mother's handwriting on the first page. I opened it. Page after page. Letters. All to me. Dated over 14 months. The entire length of her illness. Some were long, some were just a few lines. She wrote about the weather, about a cardinal that visited the bird feeder every morning, about how she could hear me sleeping through the wall and it was the most comforting sound in the world. The last entry was dated 1 week before she died. The handwriting was shaky, uneven, but still hers. You're going to be okay, baby. I made sure of it. I sat on her bed. I held the journal against my chest. And I cried. Not from grief, not from anger, not from relief. From the simple, overwhelming knowledge that I was loved by someone who planned for a future she would never see. The wind chimes on the porch sang through the open window, and for the first time in months, I could breathe. Here's what happened to everyone after that room emptied. Richard moved to Columbus, Ohio. He stayed with his older brother, Gary, in a 2-bedroom apartment off the interstate. He had $50,000. After Knox's legal fees and Myers's consultation charges, $12,000 between them, he had $38,000. No house, no investments, no wife. Denise left the reading that day and didn't come back. Not to the house, not to Richard's phone calls, not to anything. 2 weeks later, Richard came home to Birchwood Lane, while he was still within his 30 days, and found her closet empty, every piece of jewelry, every shoe, gone. She filed for separation the same week. Richard told Aunt Vivian she'd changed her number. I learned later, through Margaret, that Denise had been trying to petition for custody of her 2 children from her first marriage. Her entire case depended on demonstrating financial stability. Without Richard's money, without my mother's money, she had nothing to show the judge. The petition was denied. The community found out. Not because I told anyone. I didn't post anything. I didn't call anyone. Uncle Thomas told one person. That person told two more. Within a month, the same relatives who had called to lecture me about being ungrateful were leaving voicemails I didn't return. We didn't know the whole story, Dahlia. We're so sorry. We should have listened. I didn't blame them, not really. Richard had told a good story. He always did. But the truth was louder. It always is. It just takes longer to arrive. I didn't need the world to know what happened. The people in that room knew. And that was enough. Margaret sent me a final letter a week after the 30 days were up. Short, professional. One line at the bottom in her own handwriting. Eleanor would be proud. I am too. The first thing I did with my mother's gift was make sure I could stay alive. I enrolled in a comprehensive health insurance plan, the kind that covers rheumatology, lab work, prescriptions, and the kind of emergency room visits that lupus sometimes demands at 2 a.m. I hadn't had insurance in 5 weeks. Those 5 weeks had cost me more fear than I can describe. Dr. Briggs ran a full panel at my first appointment back. He looked at the results and looked at me over his reading glasses. Your labs are better than they've been in 2 years. He set the chart down. Stress kills, Dahlia. Peace heals. I started working again, part-time at first, 3 days a week at a community outreach center downtown. Social work. The thing I'd gone to school for before lupus interrupted everything. My role was simple, helping women navigate financial abuse in family systems, helping them understand what they were entitled to, helping them find lawyers like Margaret. There were days I couldn't get out of bed. Lupus doesn't care about your plans. But now I had the resources to rest when I needed to see a specialist when a flare hit, to live without the terror of choosing between groceries and medication. Aunt Vivian came over every Saturday. She brought containers of soup and gossip about her neighbors, and the quiet, steady presence that reminded me I still had family worth the word. I did one more thing. I sat down with Margaret and set up a trust of my own, not because I needed to protect myself from anyone, but because my mother taught me what preparation looks like, what love looks like when it thinks ahead. I didn't inherit just money. I inherited my mother's courage, and I intended to use it. 6 months later, a letter arrived. Handwritten, postmarked Columbus, Ohio. I recognized his handwriting before I opened it, tight, slanted right, the same hand that signed my permission slips in elementary school. Dahlia, I made mistakes. I know that now. I miss your mother. I miss you. Can we talk? Dad. I sat with the letter for a long time, on the porch, in Mom's chair, the wind chimes turning slow circles above my head. I didn't feel anger. That surprised me. I expected anger, the way you expect thunder after lightning. But it didn't come. What came instead was something quieter, a clear understanding that some doors need to stay closed, not out of hatred, out of honesty. I went inside. I sat at the kitchen table. I pulled out a piece of stationery my mother used to keep in the hallway drawer, cream paper, her initials embossed at the top. I wrote, Dad, I don't hate you, but I can't trust you, and I won't pretend to, just to make you feel better. If you're serious about changing, start with yourself, not with me. I wish you well. But my door is not open right now, maybe one day, but not today. I folded the letter, sealed the envelope, wrote his address, walked it to the mailbox. I didn't shut the door forever. I want to be clear about that. I didn't make some grand declaration about never speaking to my father again. That would be a different kind of cruelty, and I've had enough cruelty for one lifetime. But I didn't open the door out of guilt either, or loneliness, or because someone told me I should. If that door opens again, it'll be because I'm ready, not because I'm pressured. I went back to the porch. The wind chimes caught a breeze. I listened to them the way I used to listen to my mother humming in the kitchen. Not the melody, just the fact that it was there. I'm not telling you this story because I want sympathy. If that's what you heard, let me try again. I'm telling you because somewhere out there, someone is listening to this at 2 a.m. Maybe on their phone, maybe through earbuds so nobody else hears. And maybe that person just lost someone they love. Or maybe they're being told they're a burden. Or maybe their family is fighting over things that should be sacred, a house, a promise, a name on a piece of paper. If that's you, I want you to hear this. My mother taught me that love isn't just words. Love is preparation. It's sitting in a lawyer's office when you're healthy and thinking about what happens when you're not. It's putting someone's name on a trust they don't even know about because you know the storm is coming and they'll need shelter. If you have a sick child, a vulnerable parent, a family member who depends on you, please talk to a lawyer, set up a trust, write a will, name your beneficiaries, don't leave it to chance. Don't assume the people around you will do the right thing when you're gone. Some will, some won't, and by then, you won't be there to find out. And if you're the one being told you're not enough, that you're a burden, that your illness makes you less, that you should be grateful for scraps instead of standing up for what's yours, hear me clearly. You are enough. Your illness doesn't make you less. Your need for help doesn't make you weak. Anyone who uses your vulnerability against you has told you exactly who they are. Believe them. My mother believed in me from a leather chair in a lawyer's office 3 years before she died. She never told me. She just did it. That's the kind of love that outlives everything. It's spring now. I'm sitting on the front porch of 417 Birchwood Lane. My porch, my house. The house my mother bought, protected, and gave to me. Not with a speech, but with a signature on a Tuesday afternoon that nobody knew about. There's a cup of tea on the railing, chamomile, Mom's favorite. I don't even like chamomile, but I buy it anyway. The smell of it is the closest I get to sitting next to her. My mother's journal is on the table beside me. I've read every page, some of them twice. Some of them so many times the ink is starting to fade where my thumbs hold the paper. I keep it close, not because I need to read it again, because the weight of it in my hands feels like her hand in mine. Lupus is still here. It will always be here. Last Tuesday was bad. My knees locked up and I spent the morning on the kitchen floor waiting for the prednisone to work. But I have insurance now. I have a doctor I trust. I have a body that fights me, and a life that's finally worth the fight. In the garden, something catches my eye. Along the back fence, where the sunlight hits first in the morning, a row of tulips, red and yellow, tall and open. My mother planted them last spring, 9 months before she died. She was already in treatment, already losing weight, already tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. But she knelt in the dirt with a trowel and planted bulbs she knew she would never see bloom. She planted them for me. My mother planted tulips she'd never see bloom. That's what love looks like. I close the journal. I lean back in the chair. The wind chimes sing. And somewhere, I don't know where, I don't know how, she knows I'm okay. So that's my story. It's not about money, it never was. It's about a mother who loved her daughter enough to fight from beyond the grave. It's about a woman who saw the worst coming and built a shield out of paperwork and preparation and the quiet, stubborn belief that her child deserved better. If you've ever been underestimated, discarded, or told you don't matter, I hope this story reminded you of something simple. Someone sees you. Someone believes in you, even if they're not here to say it anymore. And if they were anything like my mom, they already made sure you'd be okay. You just might not know it yet. If this story touched your heart, let me know in the comments. What was the moment that hit you the hardest? If you've ever had to set boundaries with family, type, "I stood my ground" below. Hit like if you believe every parent should protect their child's future. And check the description for more stories like this one. I'll see you in the next one.